gay is bad for you.
Why do you think that is bad?
Because, I don't know, I wasn't born that way.
Well, but do you think that people are born that way?
Some people, I think that you have to find a boy and a girl. I mean, you can get married like that, but gay, you can't get married.
But do you know why you don't like it?
I know.
Why does it matter so much to other people who you love and who you marry?
Because gay is bad for you.
So if someone was your friend and they turned out to be gay, would you still be their friend?
No.
Do you think that by the time you have grown up, that gay marriage will be legal everywhere?
No.
Oh my god, this might make me cry. Oh my god, his heart. Okay, why are you guys freaked out? Like, he just likes them. I'm trying not to cry. Oh wait, does that mean he likes them now?
I think it's important for a popular kids show like Sesame Street to have characters who are both gay and not gay, or no?
Yes, they should. They should incorporate all types of couples. The Loud House. At the end of the show, Lincoln Loud's best friend said, "I'm so glad that I have two best dads in the world." I think that meant that even if you don't have a mom, or even if you don't have a dad, it's still okay, because they're still your parents.
Anyone else? You'll be okay. I promise.
Oh, wowzers, those waterworks are starting to come. I hate when people that are gay and lesbian, they say that they're different, but they're not really different. Whew, is this a try not to cry challenge? Because if it was, I would have lost immediately. I feel like the people that don't like gay people, and like everything else, it's probably because they didn't learn when they were young. Like, I'm glad my parents taught me that everybody can live their life. And I do remember when I was young, I did a gay video, and they're like, if you had a friend that was gay, would you accept it? And I went, no. Let me clarify something. I was only 5 years old, okay? I did not know anything. Honestly, in my head, I was like, what the heck is this dude talking about? Like, Benny was there, and I was like, what is he talking about? Like, get some sense in your brain. But now I understand it, because why my parents stopped me. Everybody should just accept it and move on in life, because it's nothing big. It's not like the end of the world's happening because he's gay.
Happy Pride, everybody!
Happy Pride!
Who here knows what gay pride means?
It means where, like, all the gay people, transgender, lesbian, bisexual people gather up and celebrate.
That's absolutely right. It's a celebration of sexual diversity. So I'm not gay, but I'm a gay ally. Are you gay allies?
Definitely.
Great answer. What does it mean to come out of the closet? What do you think about gay marriage?
I just think it's normal marriage.
Right.
My auntie, I know that she's gay. She hasn't married yet. And I'm just wondering if I am going to be her flower girl.
And you know what? When you find out that your auntie is going to marry a woman and your number one concern is if you're going to be the flower girl, you have your priorities straight. Do you think it would be cool to have two moms?
Yes.
What would it be like to have two dads?
It would be crazy. It depends on how their personality is.
Can you name any gay celebrities?
Ellen DeGeneres.
Uh-huh. What about Neil Patrick Harris?
Who's that?
Do we know Ricky Martin?
No.
Ricky Martin is a singer, and now he's a gay icon. A gay icon is someone who's revered by the gay community. And Jodie Foster is a woman, and she made me question my sexuality when I was a child because I liked her so much.
Oh.
And she was nude in the film Nell. Not that I remember watching it several times as a child.
Wow.
Guys, I'm so impressed with you. Remember, what are we to the gay community? We are
Gay icons.
Sure.
I'm an ally. Maybe I could be an icon.
I mean, everybody should aspire to grow up and be a gay icon.
That's what Pride Day is all about.
You're right. See you at Pride, everybody.
Do mosques in this country, Muslim mosques in this country, do they teach the virtues of homosexuality? One of the bedrocks of being a Muslim in terms of faith is that this whole thing of homosexuality being a sin, marriage between a man and a woman and so on, that does not reflect the more liberal way that this country has become.
But why is that?
And nor is it viewed as tolerant. Your faith, as you've already laid out, is to many people encouraging homophobia. You think being gay is a sin, and you think that people aren't born gay, they all become gay.
There's clearly a population group
who feel that they are not comfortable with homosexual expression.
Well, it probably
and they
doesn't
want
help
out
if
of
they're
it.
being...
Yeah, but you
Probably
And they
doesn't
want
help
out
if
of
they're
it.
being
Yeah, but
called
do
an
you know what-
aberration.
do you know what we call these people, Dr. Michael? We call them horrible little bigots in the modern world. Just bigoted people who actually talk complete claptrap and are, in my view, a malevolent and dangerous part of our society. What's the matter with you? How can you think that nobody's born gay and they all get corrupted and they can all be cured? Who are you to say
where's your
such garbage? You seem to care very much about people like Josh. You think he wasn't born gay.
no.
He got corrupted by these urges and now needs to be cured by Saint Michael, who is here to rid the world of the scourge of homosexuality. To which I say, shut up, you old bigot.
You've got it wrong, Piers.
Sorry, but this is ridiculous. Has it crossed your bigoted mind that gay people may not want to find your path?
The largest study of its kind was published Thursday in the journal Science. It looked at nearly 500,000 adults in the US and the UK and found new evidence that genes could play a role in people's sexuality, but there is no specific gene that makes people gay. Instead, researchers say being gay is influenced by both genetic and environmental factors.
Surveys have found that people who view sexual orientation as an innate trait, like eye color, tend to be more supportive of LGBT rights. Now, why is that? When asked, folks typically say, well, it's just wrong to discriminate against someone for how they're born. It's like ethnic discrimination. Makes sense. So for years, the born that way argument has been used to promote LGBT equality. But there are three problems with the born that way argument. First, it's not scientifically accurate. Second, it's not legally necessary. But third, and most important, it's actually unjust. And it's time to retire that argument for LGBT equality. Now, my passion for this issue stems from my own research on sexual orientation. Over 20 years ago, I started a study tracking over time 100 women with different sexual identities. And over the years, I was frankly surprised by some of the changes that they went through. Some of the lesbians ended up involved with men. Some of the heterosexual women ended up getting involved with women. And when these sorts of things would happen, women would say to me that they thought there must be something wrong with them, since their experiences didn't fit the conventional wisdom that sexual orientation is fixed at birth. It breaks my heart when I hear people express distrust of LGBT individuals who came out late in life, for example, after a heterosexual marriage. People will say things like, how could they not have known all this time? Are they sure that they're really gay? Just imagine how it feels to hear that from someone that you just came out to. But the plain truth is that gender and sexual development show a lot more variability than most people realize. And that variability often leads to change over time in sexual attractions. National and international studies conducted by researchers at Cornell, the Harvard School of Public Health, the University of Virginia, and many others have collectively tracked tens of thousands of individuals for 5, 10, 15 years. And guess what? Sexual attractions show a fair amount of fluidity. Some individuals start out exclusively attracted to one gender, and over time they find themselves attracted to both genders, or vice versa. Some bisexual individuals shift from being more drawn to one gender to being more drawn to the other. If sexuality were totally locked down by genes, well then if you had two identical twins and one twin was gay, the other twin would be gay 100% of the time because they had the same genes. Keep in mind that we first started using this argument in the 1960s and 70s in response to anti-gay activists who said that LGBT individuals were choosing an immoral, deviant, disgusting lifestyle. We said, we didn't choose this. We were born this way. You can't punish us for something that is not our fault. It's like we have this terrible disease and we need to be pitied instead of punished. Thankfully, times have changed. The born that way argument is also unjust because it implies that LGBT individuals who fit a certain cultural stereotype, the ones who've been exclusively gay for as long as they can possibly remember, are somehow more deserving of acceptance and equality than someone who came out at age 60 or whose attractions have been more fluid, because all of these large-scale population studies have found that there are actually more individuals out there with bisexual attractions than exclusive same-sex attractions. And the born that way argument can really backfire when it comes to bisexuals. There was a woman in my study who came out to her parents when she was 19 and she met her first girlfriend. They really struggled with it, but they joined a family support group, and the leader of that group emphasized, your daughter was just born this way. Well, a couple of years later, she ended up getting involved with a man, and she was actively hiding this relationship from her parents. Why? She said to me, they only accepted me because they thought I couldn't help but to be with women.
In 1948, a book was published that sparked the sexual revolution.
A zoologist named Alfred C. Kinsey shocked the world with his pioneering study, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male.
Kinsey was the father of the sexual revolution. From 1948 to 1956, he traveled the world, advising governments how to modernize antiquated sex laws. From Britain, where he advised the Wolfenden Committee on Homosexuality, to Europe and America, his advice was key to updating sexual attitudes. In 1948, Kinsey published the first scientific study of what people do in bed. Sexual behavior in the human male took the world by storm.
When the book came out, it simply hit America. It was compared to the atom bomb.
Kinsey's book challenged most known views on sexual behavior. From masturbation to adultery, homosexuality to bestiality, Kinsey's patient research appeared to reveal the reality of America's sex life.
Although many scientists were critical of Kinsey's methods, the media popularized Kinsey's findings about sex.
After publishing his reports, Kinsey traveled the country, giving lectures at universities and testifying before lawmakers. He was received as the leading scientific expert in the world on human sexuality. Kinsey was a professor at the University of Indiana in Bloomington. Despite his Christian upbringing, he would come to reject the Judeo-Christian belief of his family in favor of Darwinian philosophy, accepting the idea that man is simply a more highly evolved animal. Kinsey's critics claimed that his real motive was not science, but a social agenda to change the morality of America, something admitted by Kinsey biographer Jonathan Gaythorne Hardy.
It's abundantly clear as you go into it that there was a very large social agenda. He didn't just want a greater tolerance and sanity from understanding the facts of sex. He thought it was quite monstrous the way homosexuals were regarded.
One of the objectives of Kinsey-type programming is to change the concept of the family. If Heather has two mommies and Daddy has a male roommate, in a way, you're denormalizing the heterosexual nuclear family.
Was his research that of an objective scientist, or the intentional manipulation of a sexual deviant who wanted to remake the American male and female in his own image?
To carry out the research, Kinsey believed his key staff needed personal experience of a wide variety of sexual behavior. To ensure this, he encouraged them to have sex with each other. Kinsey's interest was not solely scientific. He had discovered that he was increasingly sexually attracted to men and had begun to live a double life. In public, he appeared to be a happily married, respectable academic. In private, he sought out homosexual encounters.
So when he builds a staff in which there is some wife swapping, when he builds a staff in which there are some, gay contacts, he's doing it, I think, out of needs that are both professional and private.
To satisfy these twin motives, Kinsey secretly commissioned a series of explicit sex films involving his staff and outside volunteers. As he immersed himself ever deeper in human sexuality, the effects on Kinsey were becoming difficult to hide. His behavior became increasingly self-destructive.
That in order to have sexual pleasure, he also had to pay for it in pain. Kinsey, on one occasion, circumcised himself with a pocket knife without anesthesia or anything else.
Another account of Kinsey's extreme self-abuse came about when his research was under investigation. Jones reports that after the Rockefeller Foundation withdrew his funding, Kinsey went to a basement, tied one end of a rope to an exposed ceiling pipe and the other end around his scrotum, then stood on a chair and jumped off.
The abuse that he inflicted on his organs, on his sexual organs, were very directly identified in his death. Orchitis, that was a serious inflammation. Now, the attempt to claim that Kinsey died of a heart attack is a perfectly reasonable thing to try to do. It's kind of embarrassing to say that the father of the entire sexual revolution, who has trained all of our sex educators in the United States of America basically, died because he had so abused himself doing the activity that they tell everybody is okay.
Seems to have always been on the side of Kinsey and his philosophy. A philosophy carried out by Hugh Hefner in 1953 when he launched Playboy magazine. That same year, Kinsey released his K-Bomb, Sexual Behavior in the Human Female, the second book in his report on human sexuality. Hefner made an immediate association between his soft porn magazine and Kinsey's research.
I referred to it in the first introduction to the first issue. Max Lerner, the historian and a good friend of mine, said that Kinsey was the researcher and I was the pamphleteer. And it's an interesting way of looking at it. I certainly do think that in a very real way, the sexual revolution began in 1953, with the second book and the beginning of Playboy.
In Playboy's 50th anniversary issue, Hefner paid special tribute to Alfred Kinsey, celebrating the man who had helped him launch the sexual revolution. But Playboy represented more than just nude photos of the girl next door. According to Hefner, the magazine was, quote, a statement of rebellion without question. In time, Hefner would publish the Playboy philosophy, a new morality for the post-Kinsey era. Just as Kinsey had gone all over the country, preaching the message of sexual reform, Hefner followed his example, giving speeches, appearing on talk shows, and speaking in public forums as the pamphleteer for Kinsey's sexual revolution.
So what you're saying, Mr. Hefner, is that we should encourage premarital sexual relations?
I think that we should encourage the notion that sex can be right and proper in marriage or out of marriage.
In time, Hefner set up the Playboy Foundation, which became, quote, one of the major sources of income for the Kinsey Institute. In 1989, a report from the National Research Council published a statement that American society can be divided into two categories, the pre-Kinsey and post-Kinsey eras. How could one man's influence come to define our culture and produce what some consider the most harmful book in American history?
What would you think if you learned that some of the most important scientific research of the century may have been based on fraud? Or, if not fraud, criminal experimentation on children funded by the taxpayer? What if you learned that the results of this research are exerting a profound influence on our society today, ranging from how we deal with sex offenders to how, when, and what our children are being taught about sex, not to mention why? Every parent in America needs to know the facts behind Alfred Kinsey's inclusion of children in his famous sex studies in the late 1940s.
Kinsey manipulated the data, including men from America's prisons, as part of the regular male population. Paul Gephardt, who was one of Kinsey's co-authors and a member of his original team, admits to the high percentage of prisoners and their impact on Kinsey's data.
55% were prison. I think that has a definite effect. We know we didn't have enough non-prison people to do much of a comparison.
With America's prison population presented as the average male, is it any wonder that laws would be changed to accommodate sexual predators? To create high levels of female promiscuity among American wives, Kinsey redefined married women to include any woman that had lived with a man for at least a year, a broad description that could include prostitutes who had lived with their pimps, mixing them in with the regular female population. As a result, Kinsey's report stated that some 50% of American women engaged in premarital sex, while 26% of married women were supposedly involved in adultery. Kinsey went on to report that an incredible 87% of unmarried women were having abortions, while 25% of married wives were also aborting. It was these high percentages, shocking even by today's standards, that would help to legalize abortion in the years that would follow.
The laws were changed based upon his fraudulent data, and he was directly involved in those changes. Kinsey went state by state. I have his testimony in California in 1949, telling a committee that was about to toughen the sex laws. He goes to California to testify in 1949 that you should release everybody, that pedophiles and pederasts did not repeat their crimes, that parole was absolutely critical, that would reduce our sex crimes.
The understanding that we have of childhood sexuality and normal childhood sexual development, as it is believed and taught in academia today, comes from the experimental evidence documented in Kinsey's meal report.
Based on the Kinsey data, sex researchers formulated a theory of child sexuality that's influenced everything from laws against molestation to how and when sex education is taught.
Kinsey's homosexual lover and co-author, Wardell B. Pomeroy,
a prominent sexologist, has written that the Kinsey research uncovered, quote, many beautiful and mutually satisfying relationships between fathers and daughters. Pomeroy also in his sex education book, Boys and Sex, refers to the possibility of, quote, loving sexual relationships, unquote, between children and animals.
Sigmund Freud paved the way for Kinsey by asserting that children were sexual, but that their sexuality was latent, that is, not acted upon until puberty. Kinsey's report radically altered this perception, spawning an entire industry based on the notion that children have a right to sexual relations at any age.
One chapter in the book dealt with the previously unresearched subject of child sexuality. It's little known that to get this information, Kinsey cultivated relationships with habitual child molesters.
Kinsey would have done business with the devil if it helped the research, and this is true.
These pedophiles would provide him with accounts of their abuse of children and with their own interpretations of children's sexual development.
He was interested in having sex with men, women, and children and animals, and he just was curious to see what would happen.
His first sexual contact was overt intercourse with his grandmother. He had looked up his family tree. There were 30, I forget how many, 33 or 38 members. He had had almost all of them. He had had intercourse with hundreds upon hundreds of males and females of every conceivable age.
The man was a U.S. government land examiner called Rex King. To protect him, Kinsey gave him the code name Mr. Green. His job took him across Arizona and New Mexico, trips he used to prey on children. He molested at least 800 boys and girls, recording the details in explicit handwritten diaries. Kinsey was told about Green by his own mentor in sex research, Dr. Robert Dickinson. Dickinson had collaborated with the pedophile for several years and taught him how to record his child abuse in scientific detail.
he told him how to measure things and time things, and encouraged him to, he knew he was going to do his ordinary behavior anyway. Dickinson couldn't have stopped him from being a pedophile, but he said, at least you ought to do something scientific about it, so it won't be just your jollies, it'll be something worthwhile to science. So he gave him some training by letter and correspondence.
Green's diaries were a highly incriminating record of 20 years of sexual abuse. But Kinsey was tantalized by the prospect of so much unique data. Kinsey met Green at a secret location in Arizona. Because of the illegal nature of their contents, Green had buried many of his diaries in the desert. Kinsey persuaded him to retrieve them and pass them on to him. Clarence Tripp was one of Kinsey's closest associates. Even today, he defends Kinsey's involvement with the pedophile.
There are two instances in which a young boy or girl, I guess it was, I don't remember, didn't complain. They agreed to the sexual contact, but then they found it very painful and yelled out when it actually took place. This was because they were very young and had small genitalia, and Green was a grown man with enormous genitalia, and there was a fit problem.
For the next 3 years, Kinsey corresponded regularly with Green. In 1948, he would publish large sections of Green's diaries in his first revolutionary book on human sexuality. But rather than presenting them as the claims of a self-confessed child abuser, Kinsey put them forward as the first ever scientific proof that children were sexual beings from birth.
Kinsey. Kinsey was a social reformer. He wanted to rid society of Judeo-Christian values when it came to sexuality. And he worked very hard to do that, and I would say he succeeded.
Kinsey would be very happy with our culture today. His idea was that children are sexual from birth, that we're all inherently sexual creatures from cradle to grave. He believed that true happiness is found in a life of perverse sexual experimentation, no matter the age.
What came out is that his research was fraudulent.
Kinsey based his fraudulent conclusions on data he collected from convicted sex offenders and child molesters. His research was conducted in prisons, not everyday America. He also performed horrific sexual experiments on children, some under the age of 1. His most influential book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, contains an infamous chart called Table 34, which documents the orgasms of very young kids, including babies as young as 5 months old. But instead of suffering the consequences for his heinous actions, he was and still is celebrated by academia and Hollywood. His ideas form the foundation for sexual education in public schools today.
Okay, well now we have another very important character, and his name was John Money.
John Money was a psychologist and professor at Johns Hopkins University. Gender ideology was his brainchild. In fact, he coined the terms gender identity and gender roles. And according to Money, babies are gender neutral at birth, and ultimately environment determines whether a person is a man or a woman.
Money was telling the world about his theory that a boy could be raised as a girl and do just fine, and vice versa.
And so Money tried out his theory on 2 young twin boys, the Reimer twins.
When the twins were 8 months old and they went to be circumcised, the first twin, whose name was Bruce, something went wrong with the machinery and his penis was burnt off. They stopped and didn't do a second circumcision on the other twin, as you might imagine. And the parents, of course, didn't know what to do. How are they going to raise this child?
John Money convinced Bruce's parents to transition him into a girl. Money also conducted sexually abusive experiments on the twins throughout their childhood, including forcing them to simulate sex acts on each other.
He reported up to the age of 10 that this was a complete success. Well, wasn't true.
The results were a disaster. Bruce could never fully accept his female identity. Eventually, his parents told him the truth, and he chose to transition back to a boy, taking the name David. As an adult, David spoke out about the abuse and the damage done to him by John Money.
The girls would do their things with their Barbies and things like that, and that wouldn't interest me. And things such as trucks and building forts and, getting into the odd fist fight and climbing trees. That's the kind of stuff that I like, but it was unacceptable, so I'd never...
As a girl?
As a girl, I had no place to fit in.
The trauma that he and his brother and his entire family went through left deep scars. His brother died of an overdose when he was 38, and then David committed suicide.
There was never a retraction or an apology from John Money. Instead, his ideas were adopted by mainstream psychology, and they form the basis of gender ideology today. Why don't more people know about John Money and Alfred Kinsey?
Evidently, there are forces that don't want this information out.